Hello and welcome back. This is a video about the 7.5 notes, and this is about multiplication of real numbers. And what we want to do today, we want to be able to multiply real numbers and then solve some applied problems about multiplying real numbers. So before we do anything, let's kind of talk about what multiplication is. Multiplication is just repeated addition, okay? And so what I want to do is talk about, like, say something like 3 times 2. Okay, when you do 3 times 2, what you're really doing is you're saying, okay, I'm going to take 2 and I'm going to add it 3 times. Okay, and 2 plus 2 plus 2 is equal to 6. Okay, now I can go the other way and I could say, well, what's 2 times 3? Okay, and that's really just taking 3 and adding it twice, okay? And that's also going to give me 6. So the cool thing is that, with this, you can reorder things, okay? Reorder them, okay? So same as, addition, you can reorder your numbers in such a way that, it doesn't matter, how you multiply them as long as you multiply. Okay, so then the other thing we need to talk about is, let's think of something else. All right, let's say if we start adding or multiplying positive and negative numbers. So let's think about this. Let's say we take 3 times negative 2. Okay, now if I do that, then what that means is that I'm taking negative 2 and I'm adding it 3 times, okay? And so negative 2 plus negative 2 is negative 4 plus another negative 2 gives me a total of negative 6, okay? And so that's another, another thing I want you to think about. What if you have this? What if you have, say, negative 3 times negative 2? And you multiply two negative numbers. So then the question is what's the opposite of a negative? And that's really a positive. And so if you do this, if you do, what that comes out to be is the same thing as, say, 3 times 2, which ends up giving you the value of positive 6. Okay, so that's kind of the why thing of multiplying positive and negative numbers. But there is a little kind of bit of a trick here, and usually what I do to teach this is I draw this triangle here, and I put a negative, 2 negatives in the corner, and then a positive up here. And the idea is that if you were to say, hey, what happens when you take a a negative number times a positive number, then you get a negative number, okay? Let's say that you take a positive number times a negative number. Then that means that you're going to get a negative, all right? And then lastly, if you take 2 negative numbers and multiply them together, you get a positive. So what I do is I just kind of take my I draw this out on my page, and what I do is I just kind of like take my pencil or take my finger, and if I'm doing like 2 negatives and multiplying them together, I cover those up, with my pencil, and then I look at what's left over. Okay, and that's kind of how you have to do it. So you can do it a number of different ways. So let's go ahead and just jump in right here and start, going through some of these examples. And so if I were to do, say 8 times negative 5, I know that my answer is going to be negative. All right, so usually what I do is I come here and I put an equal sign. And then I end up getting, I know my answer is going to be negative, and then you just need to be able to multiply 8 times 5. Now, you probably need to know your multiplication tables for a lot of the smaller numbers, but you can still add negative 5 8 times, okay? Or you can take 8 and add it 5 times, whatever you want. But 8 times 5 is going to give you 40. Okay, so, and that's what we get for that. All right. So let's take a look at the next one. The next one is a fraction, 1/3 times 5/7. And so I know that my answer is going to be negative, okay, because I have a negative number times a positive number, okay. Now, when I multiply fractions, we kind of went over this on the other end, but what I do is I just multiply across. So I'm going to take -1 times 5, which gives me -5, and then I'm going to do 3 times 7, which gives me 27. Now, notice how I just did one negative sign here. Okay, I usually choose to keep it in my numerator instead of also putting it in my denominator, and we'll kind of talk about why you can't do that in the next section. But if I take -5 over 27, those don't contain any common factors, so there's no number that's the same that I could divide into both. And so then my answer is just going to be -5 over 27, and that's it. Okay. All right. Take a look at the next one. -7.2 times 5. And so with this one, I'm taking a negative number times a positive number. And so as a result, I'll get a negative number out of this. All right. And then what I usually do is I just take 7.2 and multiply it by 5 in my calculator, and that's going to give me a value of 36. Okay, there is a long way to do it, but with multiplying decimals and stuff, I just say go ahead and use your calculator. I think that's fine. Okay, so let's take a look at this down here. I've got -9 times -3. Now remember, with that little picture that we had, negative, negative, positive, I'm multiplying two negatives together, so I'm going to get a positive. All right. So you can either rewrite this, doing just 9 times 3, okay, or you can just know that if you multiply those two together, you're going to get a positive number. So 9 times 3 is going to give us 27, okay, and that's it. Okay, moving on to the next one. On this, I've got two negatives. Okay, I'm going to get a positive out of this. This one I would probably write down and rewrite as +3/2 times 4 over 9. And then I'm just going to multiply across. So I'm going to do 3 times 4, which is going to give me 12, divided by 2 times 9, which is 18. Now, each of these numbers are divisible by 6. Okay, so I can simplify this. All right, and one thing that I can do here is then I'm going to get, what is that, 2/3 out of that, and that's my answer. Now, another way of doing this is by doing some cross division, okay, where if I take 3/2 times 4/9, because I'm multiplying my numerators, really what this ends up becoming here is 3 times 4 divided by 2 times 9, okay? And then, as a result, what I can end up doing is I can reorder these, okay? And I can say, well, let me reorder my numerator and say 4 times 3 over 2 times 9. Now, if I look at 4 divided by 2, what that simplifies to is going to be 2 over 1, okay? And then times 3 over 9. Now, 3 over 9, each of these numbers are divisible by 3, okay? And so as a result, what I end up getting is I get 2 over 1 times 3 divided by 3 is 1, and 9 divided by 3 is 3. And then when I multiply these across, I also get 2/3. Okay, so 2 times 1 is 2. And then 1 times 3 is 3. So I get the same thing, okay? And there's kind of this is the long way of doing it and thinking about it, but it'll kind of be something where, and let me kind of just, rewrite this one more time. If I were to do this, maybe you've seen this before, but if I have, say, 3/2 times 4/9, I know 3 divides in, that simplifies to 1 over 3. and then 4 divided by 2 becomes 2 over 1. So as a result, I get 1 over 1 times 2 over 3, which just gives me 2/3. Okay, so you do enough of these where you don't really need to, write out all these steps and do all this. This is probably one of the easier ways of doing it, this top method. But I wanted to show you these other methods just in case you understand how to do these. If you don't understand how to do them, you'll practice, and eventually, it'll become easy. All right. So then, what about negative 3.25 times negative 4.14? First of all, I know my answer is going to be positive because I have two negatives. So really, what I'm doing here is I'm doing 3.25 times 4.14. All right. And so this one I would just do in your calculator. There's a long way to do it, but you know what? Let's just do it, by on our calculator, and that's going to give us 13.455. All right, and that's our answer. Okay. All right, so we've got those, and then we have this idea of multiplication property of 0 and 1. So if we multiply any number by 0, all right, so multiply by 0, okay, then what's going to happen is I'm going to take, say some number 3 times 0, it's going to give me 0. All right, so multiply by 0 always gives you 0. All right, if I take, 7.1563 and multiply it by 0, okay, it's going to give me 0. All right, now if I multiply anything by 1, it's just going to give me that number. So multiply by 1, I get the other number. All right, I get the number. All right, so for instance, if I take, say, 3 times 1, that's the same thing as you say adding 3 one time, or adding 1 3 times. So 1 plus 1 plus 1 is going to give you 3. All right, you get that same number that you started with. All right, if I take, say, 7.152 and multiply it by 1, then that's just going to give me 7.152, and that's it. Okay, so it's important we know that. You probably already knew that, but I just wanted to reiterate, make sure it's in the notes. And then let's look about multiplication of multiple numbers. Okay, now what I can do is I can reorder this in any way that I want. But oftentimes what I want to do is just want to work from left to right. So if I do negative 3 times negative 2, that's going to give me a positive 6. Multiply that by negative 5, and then multiply it by 4. Okay, so if I do 6 times negative 5, that's going to give me negative 30. Okay, positive times a negative gives me a negative. Multiply that by 4. Negative 30 times 4 is going to give me a negative number, and that's going to give me 120. Okay, and that's my answer. Okay, on the next one, okay, dear Lord. Okay, so we've got some fractions here. All right, and fractions are your friend. Don't be afraid of them. But I want to rewrite this. Okay, and here's why. I'm going to write all of these as fractions. Okay, I'm going to write negative 1/2 times, and then if I were to rewrite 8 as a fraction, okay, what I would do is I would write that as 8 divided by 1. Okay, I'm going to do negative 2/3, so negative 2/3, and then negative 6. Now that's going to be negative 6 over 1. Okay, and then I'm just going to multiply across. All right, so I'm going to do negative 1 times 8. It's going to give me negative 8 over 2 times 1, which is 2, and then times negative 2/3 times negative 6 over 1. Okay, negative 8 times negative 2, that's going to give me positive 16. All right, divide that by 2 times 3, which is going to give me 6, and then I'm going to multiply that by negative 6 over 1. Now, I'm going to do this a couple different ways. Okay, so I'm going to do it, I'm going to rewrite this over here, 16 over 6 times negative 6 over 1. All right, so if I have 16 times negative 6, okay, that number is going to give me a negative, but that I don't know that one right off the bat, and so I'm just going to use my calculator, and I get 96, but that's going to be negative 96. All right. And so negative 96, and then 6 times 1 is just going to give me 6. Now, if I take negative 96 and just divide that by 6, that's going to give me 16. All right, and so this just then becomes negative 16. Okay, now the other thing I can do is notice that I have a 6 over a 6. Okay, and it's going across like this. Now, if I wanted to rewrite this, I would say, 16 times negative 6 over 6 times 1. I can reorder my numerator and say negative 6 over 6 times 16 over 1. And then 6 divided by 6 is just 1. It's going to stay negative, and it just gives me negative 16 over 1, which is just going to give me negative 16. Okay? So a couple of different ways you can do that. When you're dealing with fractions, this whole concept of dividing things out is really important. All right? So, go ahead and go get started on the homework. Make sure you're doing 1 through 57 odd, every other odd, I mean. And we'll see you soon. Thanks. Bye.